How can a golfer hit a tiny golf ball from the teeing ground to a hole 300 or 400 yards away in 3 or 4 strokes? Now we are going to disclose this mystery of how far and how high the golf ball can go by using the math behind it.
Welcome, my friends, to today's program. I will be taking you through the dark secrets of golf. I am Professor Zhen Yuchen, and today we shall explore classical parabolic motion, general flight equations, and Bernoulli's principle. Now let us journey through the world of golf. Prepare yourself.
Golf. It's a complex game. Most believe this to be a simple, expensive sport. However, people don't usually consider the advanced mathematic principles and true intricacies of the sport. We begin our exploration with classical parabolic motion. Classical parabolic motion is the most simple principle of golf, describing the motion of a golf ball without accounting for air resistance, Magnus force, or other outside forces, as if in a vacuum. When we hit a golf ball, its flight path will look like a parabola if we only consider gravity. However, when you actually play golf, there are other external factors that affect the golf ball's flight path. Before we can understand the golf ball's actual flight, we need to understand classic parabolic motion first. Classic parabolic motion can be derived from a system of two differential equations in the x and y directions, x being how far the ball goes and y being how high. Gravity is the only force that is considered. Everything else is ignored. This assumes no wind, drag, Magnus force, change in altitude, or changes in humidity. First, this is how we derive the position function in the y direction, or the height of the ball. We start off with Newton's second law. Summation of F sub y equals mass times y double prime, which means the total force in the y direction equals mass times acceleration. In the second step, the only force acting on the ball is gravity, which is g. Therefore, mass times acceleration is equal to mass times gravity. Next, by isolating and then integrating acceleration, we get the velocity function as we have already learned. By integrating again, we obtain the position function in the y direction, or height. Now, for the x direction, it is the same as we have just described. First, the total force in the x direction is also mass times acceleration. However, unlike the y direction, where gravity is considered, there are no forces that act on the ball in the x direction. Therefore, the mass times acceleration is equal to 0 in the second step. Using these position functions, if we know the initial velocity, the initial position, and the time, we can find the position of the ball at any time without considering external forces other than gravity. Initial position is always 0, but the initial velocity depends on the angle of the club we are using. Each club has different angles. By multiplying the initial velocity by the angle in the form of sine theta or cosine theta, we can find the initial velocity in x and y directions. In this graph, we see the parabolic motion ball flight at different angles, 30, 45, and 60 degrees. The optimum flight path for the longest distance would be 45 degrees. The equations here are the same as we explained earlier, but factoring in the data from the angle of the club.
This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 15% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name. Putters, uses when a few feet away. Wood, furthest hole they say. Iron, the most commonly used at wedges, furthest tricky shoots. Last but not least is the beast of them all, puts the most momentum to the speed of the ball. It's the driver, that's what I'm talking about. Heaviest club to get the ball blow out. So what's the difference between each club that makes you have to go get a sub. The difference is the angle of loft right here that determines its distance in the atmosphere. The more the loft, the higher it goes. But don't make a mistake, cause the short distance is exposed. Each has a different use and a different feat. So let's learn about what makes it complete. With a loft of 15 short distance away, putters use the mini golf to play. Designed primarily to roll the ball along the grass. Closest to the cup, it's a special class. The only one with two striking faces to help with the aim is the appendages. There's grooves on the bases to increase distance. It reduces bounce just pure brilliance. This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 15% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name. Irons are most commonly used. Numbers from 1 to 11, whichever you choose. The higher the number, the higher the loft. The higher the distance of the ball will loft. Increasing number is heavier club head. That increases distance. Enough said. For the perfect hole, you gotta choose it right. Once that's done, just lift off in flight. Wedges are just a special class of irons, but it has special features, just like Zion. It has high mass club heads, not just for show, and wide soles for drinks used in the pros. Short distance, high altitude, high accuracy. That's why it's called utility. It's for hitting the ball onto the green. Adjusts for the perfect angle and goes in pristine. Finally, comes to the best of the best. The driver can't put up to any test. Made of both titanium and wood. It's the heaviest club that ever stood. This is why choosing a club is so important. Next time you go golfing, remember this component. It's the angle, the distance, and the club. Now you know what's the right sub. This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name.
The momentum of an object depends on two factors, mass and velocity. The equation for momentum is P equals mv, where P equals momentum, m equals mass, and v equals velocity. In the context of the game of golf, mass is how heavy the club is, and velocity is how fast you swing it. At the exact moment when the golf club hits the golf ball, the momentum of the club is transferred to the ball. That's why the momentum of the ball is equal to the momentum of the club in this equation. M ball V ball equals M club V club, where M is mass and V is velocity. As a result, golf players try to swing faster and harder in order to increase the velocity, which increases momentum, causing the ball to go further.
The general flight equations are a separate group of equations that further the concept of parabolic motions to include other forces, such as the weight of the ball, air resistance, and let me think. Oh yeah, Magnus force. As a result, the flight equation becomes distorted from the classic parabolic shape. General flight equations were also derived from the trajectories of the ball from Newton's second law of motion. Yes, Newton's second law. There is two flight equations for two different directions, x and y. In the y direction, the weight subtracted because it is the force that pulls the ball down. Air resistance is contained in both directions and is subtracted from each direction because it prevents the ball from moving forward. However, a force called Magnus force, which we'll go over a bit later, is added to both equations because it produces lift. Let's understand these equations in more detail by exploring air resistance and Magnus force.
As the golf ball penetrates the air, it pushes the air molecules out of the way. The force put on the golf ball due to its interaction with air molecules is called aerodynamic drag or air resistance. Drag refers to the forces acting against a moving object. In fact, this describes Newton's third law of motion. Drag depends on the size, shape, and velocity of the golf ball and can be calculated by the equation d equals 1/2 rho v squared ca, where d is the drag force, rho is the density of the fluid, which is the air in our case, v is the velocity of the object relative to fluid, a is the cross-sectional area, and c is the drag coefficient.
Magnus force is the force that lifts the ball. When a golf ball is hit by a club, the impact creates backspin, which occurs when the upper surface of the ball rotates backwards. This backspin generates lift by deforming the airflow around the ball. So what does deformed airflow actually mean? This is where Bernoulli's principle in fluid mechanics comes in. Bernoulli's principle states that an increase in the speed of the fluid, in our case air, occurs simultaneously with the decrease in pressure. This diagram shows how backspin of the ball causes the air on top to flow faster, and the air on the bottom to flow slower. When the velocity of the air above the ball becomes faster than that of the air below the ball, a lower pressure occurs above the ball and a higher pressure below, which generates lift. The Magnus force counteracts gravity and enables the ball to travel further. The Magnus force lifting the ball is calculated using the density of the fluid, velocity, the Magnus coefficient, and the cross-sectional area, where F sub m equals Magnus force, rho equals density of fluid, v equals velocity, c sub l equals Magnus coefficient, and a equals cross-sectional area.
The design of a golf ball plays a big role in its flight. In fact, golf balls are designed with dimples in order to change the airflow around the ball. Dimples like backspin also cause air turbulence around the ball, which can be explained by Bernoulli's principle. The air above flows even faster with these dimples and the air below even slower. This difference creates a greater lift. However, if these dimples create a higher air turbulence and therefore a higher lift, why isn't everything dimpled? Let's borrow a graph from NASA. This graph displays the coefficient of drag, which is a number that determines how much air resistance is created, and therefore how fast and easy an object moves through fluid and space. This number is compared to the Reynolds number. The Reynolds number is most simply a ratio that describes the shape of a sphere. You'll notice that there's only one area where a rough or dimpled surface creates a lower coefficient of drag or a higher speed than a smooth object. It happens to occur that a golf ball's Reynolds number falls exactly into this range. This means that for a sphere the size of a golf ball, a rough or dimpled surface will create a lower coefficient of drag and therefore a higher speed and lift than a smooth surface. This is why other things like planes and volleyballs aren't dimpled, but golf balls are. However, the implementation of dimpled golf balls didn't proceed so smoothly. If this change had happened a few years in the future, it might have looked something like this. Are we ready to conclude this meeting?
Wait, I've discovered something very dark and troubling. I'm perfecting my thesis on my theory of dimples.
This again? Leave us. You've allowed the dimples to twist your mind. Until now, you've become the very thing you swore to destroy.
Don't lecture me of smoothing Smoothington. I see through the lies of your order of smoothness. I do not fear the dimples as you do. I have brought control, distance, and security to my golf ball.
Your new golf ball?
Don't make me kill you.
William Taylor, my allegiance is to the old golf, to smoothness.
If you are not with me, you are against me.
A dimpler deals in absolutes. I will do what I must.
You will try. Ever since that day, golf has been revolutionized. This battle ushered in a new era, one of dimpled balls and new heights, all in the sport of golf.
We've invited Tiger Woods to help us demonstrate how Newton's second law, third law, and Bernoulli's principle work in the flight of the golf ball. When you go to play golf, or when you are watching a golf game in the future, we hope you will remember what we shared with you today in Mrs. Chin's calculus class, about how math helps to disclose the mystery behind the flight of a golf ball.